Welcome to Sermon Q&A. I'm Pastor Alex here in the studio with Pastor Craig and Pastor Michael. And on March 6th, 2022, we preached the second sermon in our series, How Jesus Made Followers. And so coming from that sermon, Pastor Michael, I have a question for you today. That question is my persistent sadness or depression sin?
Yeah, you might be wondering if you read the passage of the wedding of Cana and Galilee, how this question comes out of it.
How did we get here? Okay.
And the mom and dad might be sad.
I know. Yes, that could be. Yes, that's possible. So the one of the what's at the end was that one of the ways Jesus drew people was through his eating and drinking and joy and laughter. And there was something about him that was super contagious. And he is the source of all life. And so when you are connected to Christ, you are connected to the source of life. That's emotional life, physical life, spiritual life, wholeness. Jesus makes things whole. And so when we look at people and we say, like, I use the first three fruit of the Spirit. I said love, joy, and peace. So uniquely mark this man that sinners and tax collectors were like, yes, and legalists and fundamentalists, Pharisees hated him.
Yeah, right.
And it was interesting that the sick were drawn to the doctor, and the people who thought they were healthy but were actually really sick, were repelled by him.
Yeah.
So, but now if you're sitting in my message and I'm saying to you, the kingdom of God is eating and drinking and laughing and love and joy and peace. And you're sitting here and you're going,
that's not my experience.
all I want is to be happy.
Right.
Like that would be my dream if I could experience joy.
Yeah.
In fact, I wake up and I want to end my life, or I wake up and I don't have any energy to get out of bed. And so there's no way for me to preach on this without kind of saying, hey, FYI. It's like preaching on alcohol and acknowledging alcoholics. You got to just kind of address the reality in the room. So is my persistent sadness or depression sin? Maybe not. Okay. I think this is a scenario where you have to sit down with somebody and say, look, just let me hear your story. And so I think this is a good time to just identify a few things, because most people aren't living in the clinical world of depression. They're not counseling. They don't understand it. They're not doctors. So, and at the end of the day, depression itself, the experience of sadness, that's an emotional reaction. It's a symptom. Depression itself is not a sin. It's an indicator that something in your body, in your soul, in your mind is out of whack. There is a lack of wholeness somewhere. It may be your fault. It may not be your fault. But it's like anxiety. Anxiety is a biological, physical experience created by God to be put into your body as a red light.
Yeah, it's a warning light, right?
Right? So Jesus had anxiety in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the experience of anxiety wasn't sin. Anxiety is actually a good thing. It actually means your body is telling you like something's broken.
Something's off right now. Yeah.
So if you have persistent depression or persistent sadness that just will not release, your body's communicating to you. That lack of desire to get out of bed is your body's way of saying something's not right. And if you don't have what it takes to get out of this thing, someone's got to intervene because this needs to change. So depression can happen for a handful of reasons, and I think it's fair to just identify some of these. But it's like a headache. I would never look at it as somebody who has a headache and say you're sinning, right? Now, if they jammed a nail in their head, I'd be like, that was stupid. That might have actually been sin, But like, you might be dehydrated. You might have hormonal challenges or changes going on in your body. You might have overworked yourself. You might have just gone out of a sauna and been in there too long. There's a million. So if somebody has a headache, you listen. Now, typically when someone has a headache, there are common reasons and less common reasons. But that's why you don't just say, headaches are sin. You listen. And depression, I think, is a lot like that. Yeah. So here's an option. Sometimes depression is just a result of broken chemicals in your body. If your thyroid stops working, man, you're going to just feel all different feels that you never even knew you could feel. And that I've never met anybody who says, I'd like to have broken chemicals and hormones in my body. That's bad. And so even when you're trying to go through the medication process of regulating yourself, it's a trial and error. And sometimes it gets worse because they give you the wrong medication or you thought you had the right one. So a lot of grace and patience on that one, hopefully for all of these. But sometimes there are spiritual realities and there is oppression from the demonic realm. And I don't understand, I'm not going to pretend to, how demons have the ability to impact emotions. But I'm positive that spiritual climates have very real impacts on our soul and emotions. And so the depression, or I don't even know if depression might be the wrong word. You might just say, I've been sad for a long time, Right. That could be spiritual. Sometimes it is the result of a series of poor decisions or one big poor decision that you made and you're experiencing relational brokenness, physical brokenness, and it is your fault. So the depression isn't a sin, but you actually like made a handful and series of decisions that led you to that place. Sometimes you have a trauma. Somebody does something to you, and your body just stores this thing, and it's going to work itself out over a long period of time. But the body has a way of prolonged sadness and burden when it goes through a trauma, and the body wants to heal, and the body's constantly communicating, and it could be something that happened years ago, and your body just will not release it, and you got to figure this stuff out. So again, I want to be careful, but what I do see, I see all sorts of depressed people who are there for different reasons, but it is very common that somebody is eating poorly. They're making a series of bad decisions. They're making bad relationship decisions. They are making bad sexual decisions, bad entertainment decisions. They're filling themselves with the world, and the world promises them temporary pleasure, but then gets long-term pain, emotionally, physically, spiritually, sexually. And they're depressed, and the depression isn't the sin, it's a symptom. But the experience is God giving them over to the repercussions of their decisions. And I can look at somebody and say, your depression stinks. And you might actually need medication to get you out of it, to like regulate yourself again.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I just listened to a podcast about this kind of stuff on Friday, and it was interesting. They're talking about just studies on happiness and that kind of stuff. And what has been found is that by and large, most people have a sense of purpose, have a sense of like strong family, strong relationships. But what happens, what they say is like, if you're drinking a lot, if you're not like eating poorly, if you're, not working, like you think like, oh, there's some core problem that's going to somehow resolve those things. And nobody believes if I change those things, it'll start to change.
Yeah. Elijah is depressed.
Right.
And God says, have some food.
Right.
Take a nap.
Yeah.
Wake up. And we'll start over. And he gets up, and it's better.
Right, like crazy, just like physiological stuff that can make a so
you and me, but we've been working out for a few months now, right?
Yeah.
And
I am a different person.
I feel happier.
Right. Like for sure. 100%.
Physical motion, the ability to use your body. And I'm not saying you haven't been working out.
But you do seem a little sad. I just want to let you know.
We keep talking about it, and you're like, cool.
Yeah. I should do that. Yeah.
I should do that. But like the way you use your body, how you eat. I mean, if you're eating hot Cheetos and Doritos and Fritos and Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew and Coke every day, it will have an effect on the way you
more than just
feel.
Like your physiology doesn't impact your emotional state, impact your mental state, so all of that.
I think at the end of the day, having somebody sit down with you, whether it's a doctor, a counselor, a pastor, somebody you trust, somebody who loves the Lord, and saying, let's just process through all of this. And some of the, if it is circumstantial, 98% of this stuff, 99% of cases can be overcome with intentionality and like becoming a whole normal person with the Lord, with your relationships, repenting and apologizing when you need to, dealing with the junk that happened in your life, paying attention to your blood work, figuring out what's happening hormonally, different things like that. It might take a little time to get there, but it's actually doable. And I think it is incumbent upon us that we pursue a place. And what I talked about in the sermon was that it's not that Jesus didn't experience grief and pain and anger and irritation. He did. They weren't his default.
Right.
His default, when he went to bed at night, it was love, it was joy, and it was peace. He could sit in a boat in a storm and sleep like a baby because he wasn't controlled by all of that stuff out there. But he did have human experiences because he was fully man. Sure. And I think for us to pursue a place where love and joy and peace are our default, and it is biblical and good to have the default interrupted by hard negative emotions. But we deal with them decisively, directly. We let ourselves experience them in the right amount of time, and we go back to our default. And that's what I think made Jesus so compelling is he was a real human who had real emotions, but his default was love and joy and peace. And that was the commission. This is part of the Messianic kingdom. It's a group of people who follow Jesus, who are eating and drinking, and they're joyful and they're celebrating. And that happens out of the core part of your being, being love and joy and peace.
I totally love it. And the one thing that I will add to the conversation is that Jesus says, "You will in this world, you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And nobody would have listened to him if he didn't constantly demonstrate love, joy, and peace. They'd say, "Oh, you've overcome? yeah, you don't really act like it. I don't want that kind of overcoming. So he obviously had something in his life, like you're talking about.
Something like that, yeah.
That was an attractive default that wasn't overcome with the brokenness and the sadness in this world. Even though he cried at graves and, demonstrated emotions, his default was the right default. Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sticking around for that question. Please stick around for more on Sermon Q&A.